The massive auditorium of America's Got Talent buzzed with restless excitement. Spotlights scanned across thousands of expectant faces, fluttering like fireflies in a dark forest. People chatted, laughed, and whispered predictions about what kind of act would appear next. But behind the curtains, away from the cheers and the booming energy, stood a boy who looked like he didn't quite belong in all the noise. He was small, maybe 14 or 15, wearing a neatly pressed white shirt tucked into simple black pants. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. He held his microphone with both hands as if it were something fragile, something precious that he couldn't afford to drop. His name was Alonzo, a Filipino teen with big, gentle eyes and a voice he wasn't certain the world was ready to hear. A stagehand tapped him lightly on the shoulder. "You're up next. Ready?" Alonzo nodded, but his heart hammered so loudly, he wondered if the audience would hear it before they heard his voice. He took a shaky breath and stepped toward the blinding entrance to the stage. As he walked, his mind replayed a memory, one he always carried with him like a hidden locket. He was 5 years old, sitting on his grandfather's lap in a small wooden house in the Philippines. The old radio crackled as Elvis Presley's "Love Me Tender" floated through the room. His grandfather, a gentle man with a warm smile and a deep pride in old music, hummed along. "That's the king, Apo," he had said. "Elvis. One day you'll sing like him." Back then, little Alonzo didn't understand the weight of those words, but now, with his grandfather gone and his dreams trembling inside him, those memories were all he had to hold on to. As he reached the center of the AGT stage, the roar of the crowd dimmed into a gentle hum. The lights were so bright he could barely see the judges, but he knew they were there. Howie, Heidi, Sophia, and the one who scared him the most, Simon Cowell. Every contestant feared disappointing him. Every singer feared that look, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, lips pressed in quiet judgment. Alonzo swallowed heavily. "Hello," Sophia said kindly. "What's your name, sweetheart?" For a moment his voice got stuck. The microphone slipped slightly in his sweaty hand. I'm Alonzo," he finally whispered. "Where are you from?" Heidi asked. "I'm from the Philippines," he answered, a spark of pride flickering in his voice despite the nerves. "I moved to the U.S. recently." The crowd cheered. The Filipino community always made itself known in the AGT audience, and tonight was no different. Waves of applause made Alonzo's shoulders loosen just a little. Simon leaned forward. "And why are you here, Alonzo?" Alonzo hesitated. He had practiced this answer so many times in front of his bathroom mirror, but now, under these intimidating lights, his throat tightened. I'm here," he said softly, "because music is the only thing that makes me feel close to someone I lost." The judges paused. Even the audience quieted. "My grandfather," he continued. "He loved Elvis Presley. He played his songs all the time. He believed I could sing like him one day." His voice wavered, but he swallowed back the tears. "So I'm here because I want to make him proud." A gentle awe spread through the audience. Heidi placed a hand over her heart. Sophia gave him a soft smile of encouragement. Simon's face remained unreadable. "What will you be singing for us?" he asked, his tone neutral. Alonzo inhaled deeply. "A song by Elvis. Can't Help Falling in Love." A ripple went through the audience, some excited, some concerned. Elvis songs were iconic, but also extremely risky. Too many singers tried and failed to capture the emotion of the king. Too many tried to imitate him and ended up sounding forced. Simon crossed his arms, a small gesture that made Alonzo's stomach twist. The music cue began. Soft, gentle, familiar. Alonzo closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, imagining the small living room back home, imagining his grandfather's hand patting his back. "Just sing, Apo," the memory whispered. "Sing from the heart." He lifted the microphone and began, "Wise men say, only fools rush in." His voice was soft, softer than he intended. He was nervous, holding back without realizing it. The first few rows of the audience leaned forward, straining to catch the tenderness of his tone. "But I can't help falling in love with you." And then it happened. Before he reached the 10th second of the song, Simon raised his hand sharply. The music cut. The audience gasped. Some even shouted no, or let him finish. Alonzo froze. His eyes widened, his hands trembled around the microphone. He felt the ground disappear beneath him, felt his heart drop into a cold, empty void. Had he messed up? Was he too soft, too small, too nervous? His worst fear was unfolding in real time, in front of millions. Simon lowered his hand slowly. Stop, just that word. Alonzo's chest tightened. He blinked rapidly, feeling tears sting behind his eyes. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He didn't know whether to apologize or to plead for another chance. The entire auditorium went dead silent. Even the lights felt colder. He thought of his grandfather again, how he promised to sing for him on a big stage one day. "I'm sorry, Lolo," he whispered silently. Simon leaned forward, his expression unreadable, and in that unbearable silence, where every second felt like a lifetime, Alonzo felt something inside him collapse. He believed it was over, completely over. He had only sung for 10 seconds, and Simon had stopped him. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that this moment wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The silence in the auditorium felt heavier than any sound could ever be. After Simon raised his hand and stopped the music, the entire room hung suspended in one collective heartbeat. Every eye was locked on the small Filipino boy standing alone under the harsh white spotlight, shoulders shaking, breathing unsteady. Alonzo's eyes darted from one judge to another. Heidi looked concerned. Sophia looked confused. Howie leaned forward as if trying to understand what Simon was thinking, but Simon himself remained perfectly still, perfectly unreadable. Alonzo swallowed, his throat tight. I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. A ripple of heartbreak swept through the audience. The boy's voice was trembling, and even without knowing him personally, the crowd could feel his pain, his fear of failure, his belief that the dream he carried across oceans had slipped out of his hands in just 10 seconds. Simon tilted his head slightly. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't disappointed either. It was something else, something deeper, harder to decipher. Then he leaned into his microphone. "Alonzo," he said, his voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Do you know why I stopped you?" Alonzo's breath caught. Because I wasn't good enough? Because I messed up? The thoughts spun violently inside his head. He shook his head slowly. No, sir." Simon exhaled, folding his hands under his chin the way he did when he was analyzing something carefully, something important. "I stopped you," Simon said, "because this isn't the voice you walked onto this stage with." Alonzo blinked, confused. The audience murmured. The judges exchanged curious glances. Simon continued. "When you introduced yourself, there was a spark in your voice, a warmth, a confidence you didn't bring into the song. What I heard just now was safe. Too safe." The word safe hit Alonzo like a strange shock. He had been so terrified of messing up, of disrespecting Elvis's legacy, of disappointing his grandfather, that he had held back. Without realizing, he had wrapped his emotions in caution and offered only a fragile sliver of what he was capable of. Simon leaned forward. "You were singing softly," he said, "almost like you were afraid of your own voice." Alonzo stared down at the floor, cheeks burning. It was true. Every syllable he sang had been wrapped in hesitation. He had let fear lead instead of heart. "But," Simon added, raising a hand, "I don't think that's who you really are." This time the audience responded with a small gasp. A shift. A glimmer of possibility. Simon locked eyes with the boy. "You said your grandfather believed you could sing like Elvis, which tells me something." He paused. "It tells me you can—" The words struck Alonzo in a way nothing ever had before. His breath shook as he lifted his eyes to Simon, uncertain if he had heard correctly. Simon nodded once, firmly. "I want you to start again," he said. "But this time, don't sing like someone who's scared to disappoint a ghost. Sing like someone who's ready to honor him." The room erupted in cheers. Loud, supportive, electrifying. Alonzo's lips parted in surprise. He used to say that," the boy whispered. "What did he say?" Simon asked. "That I sing too small because I'm afraid," Alonzo replied. "But when I forget to be scared, I sound like myself." Simon smiled, an actual smile, rare and meaningful. "Then forget to be scared." A new music cue was requested from backstage. The pianist nodded, preparing to start again. But as the lights dimmed and the crowd settled, Simon lifted a finger. "Not that version," he said to the producers. "Give me the stripped-down one. Just piano. No strings, No backing harmonies? The audience reacted again, this time with excitement. Simon turned back to Alonzo. This song isn't about perfection, it's about presence. Alonzo's heartbeat quickened. His legs felt weak, but somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the nerves and the doubts, something began to stir, something warm and alive. Sophia leaned into her microphone. "You can do this," she said gently, offering him a small, encouraging smile. Heidi added, "We all believe in you. Take your time." Howie nodded. "This is your moment." The crowd roared with support, chanting his name, clapping, cheering. "Alonzo! Alonzo! Alonzo!" Tears gathered in his eyes, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of being seen, understood, and supported in a way he had never expected from such a massive audience. When the pianist began the intro once more, the atmosphere shifted entirely. The delicate notes floated like falling petals, gentle but full of emotion. Alonzo closed his eyes. This time he didn't picture the crowd. He didn't picture the judges. He didn't picture cameras or expectations or the fear of failure. He pictured a small wooden house, a warm lamp, a man with soft eyes and a smile that felt like home. He pictured his grandfather tapping his foot to an old Elvis record, and suddenly all the fear slipped away. He lifted the microphone slowly, deliberately, as if it were no longer a burden but a bridge to something sacred. Then he began, "Wise men say." This time his voice came out differently, deeper, richer, fuller, not a copy of Elvis but a heartfelt echo of something honest, something shaped by memories and love. Only fools rush in. His tone carried warmth, emotion, vulnerability wrapped in strength. The boy who once trembled now sounded like someone who had lived through loss and healing, someone who understood the song's meaning beyond its melody. The audience felt it instantly. People went silent, leaning in, unable to believe how drastically his voice had changed. It was as though a second, more powerful singer had stepped into the boy's body. Simon's eyebrows shot up. He whispered to Heidi, "There it is." Sophia covered her mouth, her eyes softening with emotion. Howie sat back, impressed. "Completely different," he murmured. Alonzo continued, "But I can't help." His voice cracked, not from weakness but from emotion, raw emotion, falling, in love. He opened his eyes and looked upward, as though singing just for his grandfather. "With you." As the final note of the phrase hung in the air, the audience rose instantly to their feet in a unanimous wave of awe. The thunderous standing ovation rolled through the theater like a tidal wave. Alonzo froze for a moment, overwhelmed. He had never heard applause that loud in his life. Tears filled his eyes again, this time not from fear but from profound relief and gratitude. But he wasn't done. The pianist played on, and Alonzo followed with even more confidence. He let his voice soar. He leaned into the emotion. He allowed vulnerability to lead. Every line was sung with clarity and soul. An echo of Elvis, yes, but more importantly, an expression of himself. The camera panned across the audience. People were crying. Parents hugged their children. Others clapped with hands pressed to their hearts. On stage, Simon's expression softened into something rarer than even his smiles, pride. When Alonzo reached the song's emotional climax, "Take my hand, take my whole life too," the entire auditorium swayed slightly, as if moved by an invisible current of nostalgia and love. "For I can't help falling in love with you," he held the last note. Steady, strong, pure. The room exploded. Cheers, screams, applause so loud it shook the rafters. Alonzo's knees buckled. He placed a hand on his chest, overwhelmed, breathless, and crying openly now. The pianist stopped. The music faded. But the audience didn't. People continued cheering, longer than expected, louder than anyone imagined for a young boy who had almost given up before he began. Simon stood. The crowd screamed even louder. He approached the edge of the judge's table, leaning forward, looking at the boy not as a judge evaluating a performance, but as a mentor seeing a spark of greatness awaken in real time. When the applause finally softened enough for him to speak, Simon raised a hand. "Alonzo," he said, his voice sincere and steady, "that is why I stopped you." The boy wiped his tears, listening. "You weren't meant to sing quietly. You weren't meant to blend in. You have a voice that deserves to be heard in its full power." The audience cheered again. Simon continued. You didn't just sound like Elvis, you channeled something very special, something emotional, something real. Alonzo covered his mouth, trying not to cry again. That, Simon said, pointing gently toward him, was a performance worthy of this stage. Sophia chimed in, her voice trembling with emotion. I felt every word. You touched all of us. You sang with your heart. Heidi added, I got goosebumps from the first line the second time. You opened your soul and we all felt it. Howie nodded. You just transformed from a shy boy into an artist. The audience erupted again. Alonzo stood there trembling, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that he had done it. He had truly done it. He had honored his grandfather. He had honored himself. He had reclaimed the voice he once hid in the shadows. From behind the judge's table, Simon gave one final nod. A legend isn't made by imitation, he said softly. A legend is made by heart, and tonight, you showed us yours. The crowd roared, and in the middle of it all, under the golden glow of the stage lights, a boy who once thought he had failed understood that he had just begun a story that the world would never forget. The final note of the song floated into the rafters of the AGT auditorium like a golden feather, suspended in slow motion. It shimmered, hung, lingered, and then fell into a sea of thunderous applause that erupted so loudly the camera shook. Alonzo stood frozen on the stage, his chest rising and falling in shaky breaths. The palm of his hand trembled against his heart as if he were trying to steady it, but the roaring of the audience only made it race faster. He felt warm tears spill uncontrollably down his cheeks. For the first time in his life, those tears weren't from fear, but from a staggering, overwhelming wave of relief and triumph. Behind the judge's table, Sophia was already standing, clapping with her hands cupped together in front of her heart. Heidi rose too, smiling so widely her eyes glistened. Even Howie, often a tough critic, was on his feet, nodding in admiration. But it was Simon, who rarely stood for anyone, who rose with an expression that carried far more weight than applause. He didn't just stand, he stepped forward. The auditorium erupted again at the sight of Simon Cowell rising. Something that, on this show, meant one thing: respect. Deep, genuine, undeniable respect. Alonzo blinked through tears as he watched the man he feared most become the first judge to walk toward him. The noise from the crowd swelled, echoing like a heartbeat inside the massive room. But even with the applause, even with the cheers, everything seemed strangely quiet around Alonzo, like the world had dipped underwater. The edges of his vision blurred with tears and stage lights, casting glowing halos around the judges and the crowd. He felt the warmth of the moment wash over him like sunlight breaking through clouds. Simon reached the center of the table, gripping the microphone. Alonzo, he began, his voice strong yet unexpectedly soft. The audience fell quiet almost instantly. Even the air seemed to pause, waiting. Simon's gaze locked on the boy. That, he said, pointing gently toward him, was extraordinary. A new wave of cheers broke loose, but this time Simon lifted a hand, calming them. He wanted the boy to hear every word. You didn't just sing that song, Simon continued. You lived it. You told a story. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something truly magical happen on this stage. Alonzo's lips trembled as he tried to speak, but all that came out was a choked breath. Simon stepped closer, still speaking. When I stopped you earlier, I did it because I sensed something, and now I know I was right. He took a breath. You weren't supposed to give us a performance. You were supposed to give us a moment, and that's exactly what you did. Hearing those words from Simon Cowell, the man known worldwide for his harsh critiques, for his brutal honesty, for his unwillingness to sugarcoat anything, made Alonzo feel his knees weaken. For a second, he feared he might collapse. Sophia grabbed her microphone, unable to hold her feelings in. I could feel your heart in every note, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. The way you connected with the lyrics, the way you carried yourself. It felt like you were singing to someone you loved. Alonzo nodded slowly, tears falling again. He wiped them with the back of his shaking hand. I was, he whispered, my grandfather. The audience reacted instantly with a deep collective awe, and several people visibly wiped their eyes. Heidi leaned in, eyes glistening. I could tell, she said. You weren't just performing, you were remembering, honoring, loving, and we all felt it. Howie added, "There's a raw honesty in your voice, a soulfulness beyond your years. It's rare, extremely rare." The crowd agreed with thunderous applause. Simon stepped closer again, his face softening in a way that almost no contestant ever saw. "Alonzo," he said, "your grandfather, I believe he heard you tonight." The boy broke. A sob escaped him. Not loud, not messy, but gentle and heartbreaking, the kind that came from a place deeper than words. He cupped a hand over his mouth, tears streaming freely down his face. The audience began to chant again. "Alonzo! Alonzo! Alonzo!" The entire auditorium seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his name. But then something unexpected happened. One person stood, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet again, not just clapping, not just cheering, but swaying together in the same gentle motion. It was subtle at first, then stronger, moving like a tide, all for a boy who thought he had ruined everything just minutes earlier. Sophia wiped a tear, noticing it. "They're swaying to the song you just sang," she said softly. "They're still in your moment." Alonzo pressed his hands together in disbelief, shaking his head as if he were dreaming. Simon leaned forward again, voice steady. "There are singers who hit notes," he said, "and then there are singers who hit hearts." He paused. "You're the second kind." The crowd roared yet again. Alonzo felt the world spin around him in warmth and applause and bright lights. For the first time in years he felt full, not of fear but of connection, of belonging, of purpose. Simon took a breath. "I have one more thing to say," he said. The room fell silent immediately. "You called yourself the Filipino Elvis," he said with a thoughtful nod. "But what I heard just now wasn't Elvis. It was you, your own sound, your own soul." Alonzo stared, not believing what he was hearing. "You honored Elvis," Simon continued. "You honored your grandfather, but you also honored your own voice, and I hope you never ever hide it again." The audience clapped fiercely, moved by Simon's words. Alonzo stepped forward, gripping the microphone tightly. Can I say something?" he asked timidly. "Of course," Simon replied. The boy inhaled shakily. My grandfather always told me that when I sing I shouldn't try to be like Elvis, that I should try to be myself." He wiped his cheeks with trembling fingers. "And I think, tonight, I finally understood what he meant." A hush settled over the crowd. Deep, reverent, emotional. "When I sing," Alonzo continued, "I feel like he's still with me." A quiet gasp rippled across the room. "And tonight, I felt him more than ever." Sophia pressed a hand to her heart, clearly moved. The audience burst into gentle applause again, supportive, loving, full of empathy. Simon nodded. "And he's proud of you," he said firmly. "We all are." Alonzo closed his eyes, whispering a soft, broken thank you, as if speaking to the heavens. Then, as if guided by instinct, he lifted his head and looked out toward the endless sea of people. The cheers softened into a rhythmic chant again. "Elvis! Elvis! Elvis!" But not the original Elvis. Their Elvis, the Filipino Elvis. The boy who turned heartbreak into music. The boy who transformed fear into fire. The boy who made an entire stadium tremble with emotion. Alonzo pressed a hand to his chest, overwhelmed. Simon smiled softly. "You have all 4 yes votes," he said, though everyone already knew it. But then, Sophia reached out and placed a hand on Simon's arm. "Simon," she said, her voice bright with excitement, "I think this deserves more than just 4 yes votes." The crowd gasped. Simon raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" he asked, pretending to be surprised. Sophia stood up fully. "This deserves something. Golden." The audience exploded. People screamed, jumped, waved their hands, already knowing what she meant. Alonzo's eyes widened in disbelief. Sophia looked at him, smiling warmly. "You gave us a moment that will live in our hearts forever," she said. "And moments like that deserve to shine." She reached toward the golden buzzer. Alonzo's breath caught. "No, no way," he whispered, shaking his head. But before he could say anything more, Sophia slammed her hand down on the golden buzzer. A burst of golden confetti rained from the sky like a storm of light. The music swelled triumphantly. The crowd screamed louder than ever before. Alonzo clasped his hands over his mouth, sobbing as he looked up into the golden waterfall falling around him. He stepped back, overwhelmed, tears flowing so freely he couldn't even wipe them away fast enough. Simon approached him on stage, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Remember this moment," he said quietly, so only the boy could hear, "because it's only the beginning." Alonzo nodded, unable to speak through his tears. Golden confetti stuck to his hair, his face, his clothes. He lifted his gaze toward the lights, toward the sky, and whispered one final message. "Lolo, we did it." And in that moment, under a glittering rain of gold, surrounded by cheers, love, and the beating hearts of millions, the quiet Filipino boy who once trembled with fear became something else entirely, a star born from memory, a legend forged in emotion. The Filipino Elvis who shook the world not with imitation but with heart.